Your network is your net worth. Come listen to some of the most successful people I know share invaluable knowledge, stories, and advice in real estate, business, and beyond. This is Weiss Advice. Whether you want to take your business or personal life to the next level, look no further. Welcome back to Weiss Advice. This is episode number 50. Usually, the episodes take a few weeks or months to get published from the time of recording, but since we are right before the 50th episode, I figured let's do something special and let's record a special episode. And I reached out to my connections. I reached out on LinkedIn with a poll on my Facebook group, Real Estate Connections Facebook group. If you're not a part of that already, check that out. And I wanted to know what interests you guys. The podcasts are awesome. I enjoy the guests. I enjoy the conversations, but I wanted to see maybe there's something that interests our subscribers, our listeners, and maybe we can actually share something that will enlighten all of them and will maybe bring something to you. And what most people said was they're interested in learning about marketing and learning about podcasting and how to market podcasts. So I figured, hey, I'll just share some of my experience. I've been doing this for 5 months. That's it. 5 months. We're heading up. Again, we're in episode 50. This is episode number 50. We're right about 10,000 downloads, so that's pretty exciting. I'm very excited about that, about 200 listeners per show on average, which is awesome. Thank you all for listening and coming back week after week. We've had some incredible guests, and I'm really happy to say that that's really, in my opinion, that's really the success of the podcast has been the incredible guests that I've been fortunate to have. And, all but, I think, 2 of the guests that I've interviewed are people that I already know, people that either I've met in person or have done business with or have, are friendly with, spoken many times. And so it's natural to have a conversation. That's why the conversations are usually a little bit more natural. I do want to give a big shout out to Streamline Podcasts. This is not a paid advertising. They are unbelievable. I couldn't do it without Carl. I interviewed Carl in episode number 26. You want to go back to that. It's entitled Live a Life by Design. Carl Sona, who is one of the founding members of Streamline Podcast, they take care of all the back end. So what makes this podcast sound so good, they put out the social media pages, those great graphics and whatnot, and do a lot more for me. So I just want to give a shout out to them. Grateful for them. Grateful to all the listeners. You guys are awesome as well. What I would like to talk about is how I market this podcast and marketing in general. I do a lot of social media. As you know, LinkedIn is the biggest, obviously. One thing for LinkedIn that you should do if you have a podcast or starting a podcast, create a business page. It's very easy to create a business page on your LinkedIn profile. You just go to your profile and click on the top of the page. On the top row, you click that work button. There's a button that says work, and you click that, and then there is a drop down that says create a company page. It literally takes about 5 minutes to do. You upload a logo if you have one, you add your website to that, and then that shows up in your profile, and then you can actually post content from your business page. And so this has been very helpful because it allows you to not just post from your personal page, but to post from your business page. Business pages get less engagement and get less exposure in general because LinkedIn, like Facebook, wants you to pay for advertising. Nevertheless, it still gets you more exposure because people are seeing that, and then you can use that you can share that content, you can refer back to that, and it's just another avenue. It's on your profile. If anyone checks out your profile, they will see that on there, and it's a great way to do that. It's also a really cool way once you launch your podcast to get a lot of attention on LinkedIn. I don't know if you've ever noticed this before, but if you've ever started a new company or you've gotten a new job or you've updated your position, anything like that, and once you update that and the notifications are turned on your LinkedIn page, that notifies all your contact that you have a new job. Okay. Now, in this case, you're starting a company page for your podcast. That's not necessarily a new job. It's a new venture. But nevertheless, all of your contacts get notified by that. And that gets a tremendous amount of awareness right off the bat. If you haven't done it yet and you had a podcast for a long time, it doesn't matter. It's a great way to get exposure. So create that company page, make sure the notifications are on, and all of your, people will start messaging you. And then it's a great way to just tell them about this podcast that you have, whether they knew about it or not. Great way to message them. So for me, that was one thing that helped a lot to get a lot of exposure. Number two, the biggest way I think is just direct messaging people. If you're posting on social media about episodes, and I try to post, every new episode that comes out, a graphic, try to post a little video when I can, a little clip from here and there, and maybe some sound bites, those, wavy things, sound bites, what are they called? Someone can comment over here. What are they called? But one thing I would do, and I like to do, is the engagement. That's the most important part. You have an engaged audience, they're going to be listening more. So I like to, and if I haven't yet for you, I apologize, but maybe you didn't connect with me on LinkedIn. Maybe we haven't messaged each other. But if someone comments on a post that I've done about the podcast episode, I will try to shoot them a message thanking them for listening or asking them if they got a chance to listen yet. And that's a great way to build your following. Because, if you ask them, hey, did you listen? Oh, no, I didn't get a chance yet. Well, please do and let me know your feedback. People can be polite and say they will, and they actually won't. But I think, half the time at least, people are sincere and will tell you one way or the other. If, hey, I don't ever listen to podcasts, but I just want to support you. You're a great guy. Whatever, gotten a lot of that. That's great. At least people are being honest, and it's creating that relationship, creating conversations. So for me, the podcast was not starting from scratch because, thank God, I'm very grateful to the connections, the people, the network that I have, that it wasn't from scratch. It was more about building on what I had already created. So that's really the biggest thing for me, has been in podcasting and marketing. I opened an Instagram account, so I started posting on Instagram, which surprisingly, I've gotten a lot of exposure through that. I mean, not a tremendous amount, not like LinkedIn. I really don't even know how to use Instagram very well. Nevertheless, I've gotten people reach out to me, new connections, new people through that, and been invited on, I love to be guests on podcasts as well, but I've been invited on, I believe, 5 or 6 different podcasts from new Instagram connections that I had not been connected with on LinkedIn or Facebook or anywhere else. And they found me through the podcast, through other people's podcasts, etc. So that's really cool. So it just goes to show you, the more you are out there, the more you're putting yourself out there, the more exposure you're getting, the more people get to know you. That's your brand you're creating, and you're able to share with more people. And that's really exciting. So if there was one thing that I would do going forward. Now, the funny thing is, I still have, before I even get to that, I still have about 20 or 25 episodes that have been recorded. Some of them have been sitting there for months because I'm just trying to put out only 2 episodes a week, sometimes 3, but usually just 2. And I have all these episodes I recorded months ago, and I stopped recording for the most part just because I want to get those out already. I want to push them out. And I feel bad because I interviewed some people, maybe back in May and June, and their episodes still have not aired yet just because I got really, really happy when it came with the recording. And I ended up recording, like in the first month of my launching the podcast, I recorded like 40 episodes. So it was like recording almost every single day, or sometimes like 3-4 times a day, which was just a lot of fun for me. But now I have this kind of stuck, database of episodes that need to get launched. So that's what hopefully I'll be doing going forward. Some great interviews, great episodes. So I'm looking forward to those getting out there, and looking forward to connecting with more people. And I've had to turn away people reaching out, wanting to be on my podcast, because for the time being, I really enjoy talking to those people I already know. So if you want to be a guest on my podcast, first thing would be to get to know me, maybe reach out to me. Don't ask to be a guest on the podcast. Maybe just have a conversation. Maybe just, see how we can help each other in business in general. And that might be a great way to then be a guest on the Weiss Advice podcast. So what's Weiss Advice all about? You may have noticed that at the end of every single episode, I say, if you listen that far, I don't know if everyone's listening all the way to the end, but if you do, you notice that I end every single episode with the following. And remember, the best advice comes only when you ask. Now, for my editors, don't stop the episode there. That's the sign to stop the episode. We're going to say that again at the end. But what this does, the first time I recorded an episode, I was like thinking to myself, we're getting towards the end. I need to say something to close off the episode. And I literally just threw that just like came out of my mouth. The best advice comes only when you ask. And I've just been saying it ever since. So what's behind that? There's multiple meanings. I mean, there's a lot of deep meanings behind that. But one of those things that means to me is you can really only get advice when you're ready for it. Okay? If you're not ready for it, if you're not seeking it, and you're not asking for it, which means you're asking someone specifically, then it's not going to go very far. It's going to fall on deaf ears, and it may not even be able to help you in the way that it would if you're willing and able to ask for advice and you need something specific. So that's why I said the best advice comes when you ask. Now, a lot of people ask questions and they're asking themselves questions, and I try to provide a platform with this podcast to interview people and ask them questions and have them share advice that may be things that we have had those questions ourselves. And that's really the premise behind the podcast, is to share stories, to share advice, and allow my guests to share, things that they have accomplished, and, me asking them questions so that I can provide value to my audience. And so we may have had those questions before. If not, maybe it's just, opening our minds up to new ideas and new thoughts that we may not have ever come up with before. And that, for me, is huge, because now that you've opened your mind up to some new ideas, well, guess what? Now that question that you have, you'll be able to apply that. You'll be able to reach out to someone with that. Or maybe, the podcast itself will be the conduit to answer that question once it's kind of open your mind up to it. So that's kind of the idea, or one layer, I should say. Maybe next time I'll share something else about it. But I just wanted to thank everyone out there for listening this far. This has been great. And remember, the best advice comes only when you ask. Real quick, I have one question for you. Did you like this episode? If you did, I want to ask you a huge favor. See, the biggest thing that helps this podcast grow and that will spread this message to the whole world is that if you leave a review, a rating, and subscribe to the podcast. What that does is it basically tells the platforms that this podcast is out on is that you like my stuff and I'm doing something right. So take a few seconds out of your day, hit that subscribe button, leave a rating or review. I would be extremely grateful. Also, I want to hear from you guys. So I want to hear some feedback. If you have any questions for future episodes, please find me on LinkedIn. Send me a DM, connection request, Yonah Weiss, and I'd love to hear from you.